Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now, sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. The first call came in like any other weekday shift in the valley. Routine cadence, routine tone, routine address. Engine 12, Medic 4. 2. Respond priority 1. Male down, not breathing. Grocery store, cross streets, West Union Hills Drive and North 9th Avenue. My partner, Leah Park, didn't look up from the clipboard. She was finishing the narcotics count on the ambulance inventory sheet, pen moving like she'd done it 1,000 times because she had. I was the one driving today, so I was already stepping into the cab. Union Hills, I said. That's the Fries. Leah clicked her seatbelt into the latch, tugged once out of habit, and reached to the center console to turn the mobile radio volume up. The rig was a Type 3 ambulance on a Ford chassis. Box unit with an electrical shoreline plug and an inverter that kept the batteries topped off when we were in the bay. Our service area covered north suburban Phoenix, Deer Valley, Moon Valley edges, bits of Glendale depending on call load. On paper, it was suburban. In practice, suburban meant long stretches of arterial roads, and a lot of places people collapsed in public. Big box stores, churches, parks, parking lots that turned into heat traps. The air outside was already warm even though it wasn't yet noon. The asphalt on the apron outside Station 4-2 shimmered in that way it does before summer really arrives. I backed the ambulance out of the bay, checked mirrors, and Leah called the en route status. Medic 4. 2 en route. The GPS on the dash offered 3 ways there, none of them clever. In Phoenix, you either go north-south, east-west, or you go nowhere. We took 9th Avenue up, then cut across. The siren was on, but not screaming. I used the wail for the long approach and the yelp at intersections, trying not to spook drivers into doing the exact wrong thing. We rolled into the Fry's parking lot and it was full. Midday shoppers, carts scattered like abandoned luggage, people staring as we pulled up. Engine 12 was already there, red truck angled diagonally to protect space. That was the first thing that felt off. The firefighters were standing outside the store doors, not rushing in. One of them had his helmet off. Another kept rubbing his face like he'd touched something gross. Leah grabbed the airway bag. I took the monitor and the jump kit. We moved toward the automatic doors and I caught the smell of produce and cleaning solution, and underneath it a sour note like sweat left too long. A store employee in a green apron was waving both arms. "He's back by dairy," she said. Her voice was too loud and too high. He just went down. He's not breathing." "Any CPR started?" Leah asked. The employee blinked like she was trying to remember what CPR was. "Somebody tried. He bit him." Leah and I traded a look. "Bit him?" I repeated. The employee nodded fast, tears bright in the corners of her eyes. "Like a dog. Like he woke up and bit him." That didn't match male down, not breathing. That matched a seizure with post-ictal confusion, or maybe drugs, maybe a mental health crisis. But no pulse was no pulse. Dispatch didn't make that up. If there was no pulse, then someone checked. The firefighters led us down the aisle. People were clustered at a distance like a ring around a small stage. The man was on the floor near the refrigerated dairy wall, right where the cold air spilled out every time someone opened a door. He was middle-aged, maybe late 40s, short hair, t-shirt damp under the arms. A grocery cart was tipped on its side nearby. A bystander, a guy in gym clothes, was holding his forearm wrapped in a paper towel. Blood soaked through it, bright and fresh. He stared at it like it didn't belong to him. "Sir," Leah said, shifting toward the man on the ground while still tracking the injured bystander. "You're okay. Stay back. We'll get you in a second." The down man's face was grayish, lips slightly blue. That part looked like a real arrest. I dropped to my knees, set the monitor down, and ran through the quick checks in the way muscle memory makes you do when your brain is trying to catch up. "Sir, can you hear me?" I said, loud. I shook his shoulder. No response. I went for the carotid pulse. Nothing. I looked at Leah. No pulse. Leah's expression didn't change. She had her professional face on, but her eyes sharpened. Starting CPR. She began compressions, hands centered, elbows locked. I tore open the pads and placed them, one upper right chest, one lower left rib cage. The monitor beeped as it read rhythm. I watched the screen. Asystole, flatline, not shockable. "Airway," Leah said between compressions. "Bag him." I fitted the mask, sealed it with 2 hands, and squeezed. The chest rose. The air from the bag smelled like plastic in hospital. I tried not to look at the bystander's arm. "Any info?" I asked the nearest firefighter. "He just dropped," the firefighter said. Then he came up swinging. We pulled people back. Some guy got bit. Leah glanced sideways. "Who checked pulse originally?" The employee said, "I did." "No, he did," he said. She was spiraling. The man on the ground made a noise. It was soft, like a grunt, the kind you get sometimes when the brain is starved and the body does something on autopilot. I'd heard agonal breathing before, those gasps that look like breathing but aren't. This wasn't that. The man's eyes opened, just opened. No slow wake-up, no confusion. His head turned and he looked right at me as if we were meeting at a coffee shop. His hand snapped out and grabbed my wrist. His grip was strong. Too strong for someone without a pulse. Too coordinated for someone coming out of nothing. He tried to sit up. Leah stopped compressions reflexively, startled for the first half-second, then immediately tried to control his shoulders. "Sir," she said, "stop, stay still, you were unconscious." He spoke clear as day. "Get off me." His voice wasn't slurred. It wasn't hoarse, it was annoyed. Then his face shifted, like something slid behind his eyes. His jaw clenched. He yanked his arm free and swung at Leah. She ducked, but his hand caught her shoulder and he grabbed the front of her uniform shirt. "Leah!" I shouted. I went to pull him off. He turned on me, still talking, still forming words like he had full control of himself. "You don't touch me," he said. "You don't touch me." He lunged forward with his mouth open like he was going to bite my face. The firefighter grabbed him from behind. 2 more piled on. The man thrashed like a trapped animal, except he was still making sentences. Short, angry ones. "Let go, let go, let go." His strength was unreal. I've wrestled people in adrenaline fights before. Drunk, high, psych patients. This was that, but with a colder intensity, like he was trying to complete a task rather than just lash out. Leah backed up, breathing hard, eyes wide now. "What the hell?" she muttered. The bystander with the bitten arm started to cry. The store employee screamed. Shoppers ran. The man on the floor bucked and twisted and slammed his head backward into the dairy door hard enough that the glass rattled. A firefighter shouted in pain. Maybe a finger bent wrong, maybe his wrist. The man's teeth snapped at anything close. He caught fabric. He nearly got skin. "Restraints," Leah said, and her voice sounded too calm for the situation, which meant she was controlling fear by turning into protocol. "We need soft restraints." We didn't carry full psychiatric restraint systems in the way hospitals did, but we had wrist and ankle straps in the rig. The firefighters tried to hold him down. I could see the pulse now, thumping at his neck under taut skin, as if it had never been gone. I had a thought that tried to surface, something about how this didn't fit physiology, and it got shoved down by the immediate problem of a violent man in a grocery store. "Let's move him," the captain said. "We can't do this in here." We tried. It took 6 people to get him onto a backboard, and he fought the entire time, twisting, talking, spitting words like curses. "You're not taking me. You're not taking me." When we got him into the ambulance, Leah climbed in with him and one firefighter, and I stayed at the door to pass gear and keep my own face away from his mouth. That's when he went still. Like a switch flipped, he stopped fighting. He stared at the ceiling. He breathed quietly. He blinked slowly. "Sir," Leah said, "can you tell me your name?" He turned his head toward her. "Kevin," he said. Leah nodded. "Kevin, do you know where you are?" "Grocery store," he said. You guys are overreacting." His tone was normal. He sounded embarrassed, like a man who'd gotten too drunk at a barbecue and didn't want to deal with consequences. I looked at the firefighter. The firefighter looked at me. Everyone had the same expression. "This is wrong, but we have to keep moving." Leah glanced at me. "Let's go, transport." We slammed the doors. I jumped into the driver's seat, hit the lights, and pulled out. Leah called it in. Medic 4. To transporting one adult male, altered mental status, combative episode now calm, requesting security on arrival. Dispatch acknowledged. We headed to the nearest appropriate emergency department, which in that area usually meant Honor Health Deer Valley Medical Center, depending on diversion status. The radio chatter on the engine company's channel was clipped and tense. I could hear it through the open speaker in our cab. "Any other patients?" "Bystander with bite injury." "Get him evaluated." Bite injury, that word hung around my head like a bad smell. Leah's voice came through the intercom from the back. "He's calm. Vitals are okay, heart rate elevated, blood pressure elevated. He keeps asking why we strapped him." I kept my eyes on traffic. "Any signs of drugs?" "No obvious track marks, pupils look normal, skin's warm, no fever." We should have been thinking stroke, hypoglycemia, seizure, intoxication, but the no pulse part wouldn't let go of my brain, and neither would how clean his speech was, even when he was violent. As we came off the freeway and turned toward the hospital, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it. Then it buzzed again. Then again. Amber Alert? Weather? Family? My phone didn't usually blow up during shift unless something big happened. Leah's phone buzzed too. I heard it through the intercom because the sound echoed in the tight space of the box. "Did you get that?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "Probably nothing." But it wasn't nothing. I knew that, and I didn't want to admit it yet. At the hospital bay, we backed in. Security was already there. 2 guards with radios, standing upright like they'd gotten a call about a problem patient. The automatic ambulance doors slid open with a mechanical sigh. For a moment, the scene looked normal. Nurses waiting with a stretcher, fluorescent light, the smell of disinfectant. That's how hospitals always started: controlled environment, organized chaos. Then the man on our stretcher sat up again. Not in a panicked way, in a deliberate way. He looked at the nurse closest to him and smiled. "Hey," he said, "you're doing great." The nurse blinked. "Sir, lay back. We need to—" He moved faster than she expected. He lunged off the stretcher with a kind of ugly coordination, grabbed her forearm, and pulled her in. But he didn't bite her. He leaned close to her face and spoke softly, almost tender. "Don't be scared," he said. "It'll be easier if you don't fight." Then he slammed his forehead into her face. It wasn't a cinematic blow. It was a hard, controlled impact that made the nurse drop immediately, hands going to her nose. Blood, just a little, not a spray, not a scene, hit the tile. She made a sound that was more shock than pain. Security rushed. Leah tried to pull him back. The firefighter from the grocery store reached for his arms. The man spun and started swinging again, mouth open, teeth bared. He was trying to grab skin now. A doctor shouted something. Someone hit the panic button. Within seconds, more security appeared. Then hospital staff in scrubs with restraint kits. They got him down, they strapped him. He fought like a machine. "Stop!" he yelled. "Stop, stop, stop!" Then he started laughing. It wasn't laughter like humor. It was laughter like his body was producing a sound because something inside was breaking. Leah's face had gone pale. "We need to get out of here," she said under her breath. I nodded, but our protocol didn't let us just leave. We had to transfer care, sign paperwork, debrief. We were now part of an incident. And the hospital was already wrong. I saw 3 other ambulances in the bay. Their crews were clustered, talking fast. A nurse jogged past, holding a stack of paperwork like it was a shield. Over the intercom, an overhead announcement crackled, words clipped and urgent. "Security to triage, security to triage." Leah handed off our patient with a rapid report, concise, clinical, like she was trying to force reality back into a normal shape. Adult male, found pulseless per bystanders, CPR initiated, regained consciousness, became combative, fluctuating agitation, normal speech, no fever, no obvious trauma, now violent again. Bite exposure at scene on bystander. The charge nurse's eyes were wide. "We have 4 like this already," she said. "Where is he from?" "Union Hills," Leah said. The nurse's jaw tightened. "Same region." A physician stepped in, sweat on his forehead, sleeves rolled up. "Any known exposure? Any recent travel? Any respiratory symptoms?" Leah shook her head. "Nothing. It's behavior. It's like a switch." The physician looked toward the doors where security was still wrestling. "Yeah," he said quietly, "we're seeing that." He pulled his phone out, glanced at it, and his face changed, like he'd just read something that made him lose faith in the next hour of his life. "State's issuing something," he murmured. Right then, every phone in the bay chimed at once. Not one phone, not a few, all of them. A sharp electronic tone that cut through the noise like a siren inside your skull. My phone screen lit up with a full-screen alert. Emergency alert. Viral outbreak confirmed. Avoid close contact with symptomatic individuals. Symptoms may be delayed up to 12 hours after exposure. Seek immediate medical guidance if exposed. Follow official instructions. More information to follow. Leah stared at her screen, then at me. The physician cursed under his breath. Not loud, not dramatic, just a word that slipped out like a pressure leak. Overhead, the hospital intercom crackled again, but this time the voice sounded different, less rehearsed. All staff, please report to your departments. The emergency department is temporarily restricting access. Repeat, restricting access." Leah swallowed. Temporarily restricting access means they're locking the doors. I felt my own pulse in my throat. "We need to go." We pushed our empty stretcher back into the ambulance bay, moving fast. Around us, other crews were doing the same, heads down, phones in hands, trying to process and act at the same time. As we crossed the bay, a man in a hospital gown stumbled out through a side door. He looked normal. No foam, no blood, no dramatic rash. He looked like a man who'd woken up from surgery and gotten lost. He called out, "Hey, excuse me." A security guard turned. "Sir, you need to go back inside." The man in the gown smiled. "Okay," he said. Then his smile dropped like someone erased it. He walked straight toward the guard, quick steps, eyes fixed. "Sir," the guard began. The man lunged and grabbed the guard's radio, yanked him close, and bit his cheek. The guard screamed. People scattered. Someone shouted for help. The man in the gown backed away, chewing nothing. There was no chunk, nothing grotesque like that, just teeth on skin, puncture marks, and sudden primal violence. It was clean in the worst way. It was plausible. It was something your brain could try to deny. Leah grabbed my sleeve. Now. Move. We got into our ambulance, slammed the doors, and I turned the ignition. The engine started with a familiar rumble. The dashboard lit up. The radio squawked immediately, dispatch tone urgent. All units, stand by for emergency traffic. All units, stand by. I pulled out, lights off now. No point advertising ourselves. And we headed back toward our station. The streets were still normal, cars moved, people walked. A landscaping truck idled at a light. The world hadn't caught up yet. But the phones had. My phone buzzed again, texts, a group chat with other medics. A message from our supervisor. Another alert that said more information to follow, and then nothing. Leah was staring straight ahead, hands clenched on her knees. Symptoms delayed up to 12 hours, she said, reading from memory. That means someone can look fine and then flip, I finished. She turned her head toward me. We were close. That guy grabbed you. I glanced down at my wrist where he'd grabbed. There was a faint red mark, like a pressure bruise. No broken skin, at least I thought so. He didn't bite me, I said, trying to sound certain. Leah's voice was quiet. At the store, when he first came up, he grabbed your wrist. His mouth was right there. And when we loaded him, you were at the door. If he spat, We both stopped. We both knew what we were thinking. Close contact, saliva, aerosols, droplets. The stuff we'd learned in training and then forgotten because normal calls didn't turn into apocalypse scenarios. I had gloves, I said automatically, then realized how weak that sounded. Leah looked down at her own hands. I got grabbed, she said. He got my shoulder. I don't think he broke skin, but delayed symptoms up to 12 hours, I repeated. I remembered the bystander at the store with the paper towel on his arm. I remembered the nurse with blood on her face. I remembered the guard with puncture marks on his cheek. I kept driving. Our station sat in a suburban pocket behind a row of businesses, a place designed for quick response times, not siege conditions. The ambulance bay doors were big rolling metal panels. The building was concrete block, windows limited, a small administrative office, bunk room, kitchen, supply room, and the bay itself. When we pulled in, there was another rig already parked crookedly. That was unusual. Our station normally had a neat lineup. The crooked parking meant someone rushed. Inside the bay, our supervisor, Chris Delgado, stood with 2 other EMTs and a firefighter captain. Chris was a former medic, thick forearms, shaved head, calm eyes that had seen everything and still had room for more. He looked up as we rolled in. "You two, in here, shut the bay." I backed in fast. Leah jumped out and ran for the wall switch. The bay doors groaned as they started to roll down, sunlight narrowing into a strip, then a bright line, then a final slash before the door hit the ground. The sound of it closing felt like a decision. Chris pointed at the rig. "Did you transport one of the violent talkers?" Leah nodded. "Yes, Deer Valley. He assaulted staff in the bay." Chris exhaled through his nose. "Okay, we have multiple calls pending. Dispatch is trying to triage, but they're getting overwhelmed. We also have a staff issue." He looked at me. "Mike, tell me you didn't get bit." My name sounded strange in that moment, like it belonged to a life before the alert. "Not bit," I said. "Grabbed. No broken skin that I can see." Chris's eyes flicked to my wrist. "Check anyway." I pulled my glove off and looked closely. The red mark was there. When I rubbed it, it didn't sting. That was good. But then I saw something else, a tiny abrasion, barely more than a scratch right where the cuff of my glove had rubbed. It could have been from anything. Loading the stretcher, a box edge, the grocery cart, the patient's fingernails. But in that moment, a tiny scratch felt like a doorway. Leah saw it too. Her eyes went wide. Chris leaned closer. That's skin break. It's minor, I said, but my throat tightened. Chris straightened. He looked past us at the captain and the others. We're not sending anyone out without protective equipment, and we're not going to hospitals unless absolutely necessary, because they're turning into the problem. The firefighter captain said, "We got word they're setting up restricted zones, but nothing's organized. The county EOC is trying." Chris rubbed his forehead. "We can't wait for an organization that might not show. We make our own plan." There was a silence where everyone looked at each other, and it was clear we were crossing from standard emergency response into something else. Leah broke it. "We lock down," she said. "We keep this building. We have water, power, supplies. We can ride out 12 hours and see what happens." Chris's gaze snapped to her. 12 hours is the incubation window they mentioned. That's what you're thinking? Leah nodded. If someone here was exposed, we'll know within that. My stomach dropped, because I knew what she was implying. If I was exposed, I was the timer. Chris looked at me again. The calm in his eyes shifted, not into fear but into calculation. "Mike," he said, "what time was contact?" I did the math quickly, like you do when you're trying to avoid the answer. "We arrived at the store around 11:15 a.m., I said. He grabbed me within the first, maybe 2 minutes of CPR. Chris nodded once. It's now about 1:30 p.m. He checked the clock on the wall to confirm. That's a little over 2 hours since contact. Alert says up to 12 hours. That gives us potentially 10 more hours of uncertainty. Everyone looked at me again. I hated that feeling. Not because I was ashamed, but because I could sense the primitive part of their brains doing what humans do. Identify risk and distance from it. Chris made a decision fast. Okay, here's what we're doing. We're not abandoning anyone, but we are containing risk. Mike and Leah, you two will stay in the Bay Area. The Bay has its own bathroom, correct? Leah nodded. Yes. Chris pointed. We'll bring you food and water. We'll keep separation. We'll use masks and gloves. We monitor symptoms. If nothing happens after 12 hours, we reassess. The word "if" hung there. The captain said, "And if something happens?" Chris didn't answer immediately. He didn't want to say what we all were imagining. What we do if an EMT turns into one of the violent talkers. But he finally said, "We protect the team. We keep it controlled." Leah's hands trembled slightly, but her voice was steady. "We need rules," she said. "Like a checklist." Chris nodded. "Yes." He turned toward the supply room. "We gear up. N95 masks, eye protection, gloves. We can't treat this like a flu, and we need a barrier system." He pointed toward the corner of the bay where extra gurneys, backboards, and folding chairs were stored. "We can build a partition with equipment racks and those metal shelving units. Create a separate space." The other EMT, a guy named Ramon, nodded. "We can use the trauma tarps too, hang them as visual barriers." Chris looked at him. "Do it." Everyone moved at once. That's what people like us do. When the world goes weird, we build a system. We dragged shelving units, wheeled in extra equipment racks, moved spare oxygen cylinders to one side, and used ratchet straps to secure things. We were building an improvised containment area inside our own station, using the same instincts we used for extrication scenes. Stabilize, isolate, control. Leah and I ended up on one side of the partition, a space about the size of a small garage bay within the bay. We had access to a sink, a bathroom, and the ambulance itself. The partition wasn't airtight, but it created distance, and distance was the only thing the alert had told us mattered. Chris brought us a small table, 2 folding chairs, and a box of bottled water. He slid them through a gap with gloved hands, mask on, eyes serious. "We'll do checks every hour," he said. "You feel anything? Headache, irritability, confusion, unusual aggression, you tell us immediately." "Unusual aggression," Leah repeated, almost a whisper. "That's a symptom now." Chris looked at her for a moment. "It's what the alert says, and it matches what we're seeing. The fact they can talk normally until the final phase is the worst part." Leah nodded, swallowing. "Yeah." Chris pointed at the monitor we'd brought in. "We'll use that to check vitals. Document everything. We need data. If the state starts asking questions, we'll have answers." He paused. Then he added, softer, "And if we don't get state support, we'll still have answers for ourselves." He stepped back. "I'm sorry," he said to me, and he meant it. I wanted to say it's fine. I wanted to be the guy who shrugs it off, but it wasn't fine. I just nodded. "We'll be okay," I said. I didn't know if I believed it. The hours after that blurred into a strange mix of routine and dread. We sat in our partitioned bay space like we were on standby, except we were the call. Every hour, Chris or Ramon would come to the barrier, masked and gloved, and ask us questions. "How do you feel?" "Normal," Leah would say. "Fine," I would say. Then check myself for irritation, for agitation, for anything that didn't feel like me. We took vitals. Heart rate, blood pressure, oxygen saturation, temperature, everything normal, except my heart rate stayed a little high because fear doesn't show on a thermometer. In between checks, we listened to the radio. Dispatch was overwhelmed. Calls stacked up. Reports came in from across the metro, people attacking family members, people flipping from calm to violent in minutes. Hospitals restricting access, police overwhelmed. Some units refusing to respond without protection. Then, an update came through on the county channel, spoken by a calm voice that sounded like it belonged to someone in an air-conditioned office. Public health advisory. Individuals may remain lucid and conversational prior to acute behavioral change. Avoid close contact. If you have been exposed, isolate immediately. Yo. Isolate immediately. We were doing that. But the advisory didn't say what to do if someone isolated with you. It didn't say what to do if your job had been responding to emergencies all day. It didn't say what to do if you were an EMT with a scratch on your wrist. Around 4 p.m., the first real sign that the outside world was changing came in the form of a call from Chris's phone speaker, held up near the barrier. It was his wife. Her voice was tight. "Chris, they're closing the school. They're telling parents to pick up kids now. There are fights in the parking lot." Chris closed his eyes for a second. "Stay home," he said. "Lock the doors. Don't open for anyone unless it's me." "What about groceries?" she asked. Chris swallowed. "We'll figure it out." When the call ended, Chris stood for a moment, staring at the wall as if he could see through it into his own house. Then he turned back into the station and began giving orders again, because that's what leaders do when they're scared. They make the next step concrete. "We need fuel," he said. "If power fails, we run on generator. Our station generator will give us lights and basic systems, but not indefinitely. We also need to consider relocating to a more secure facility if this spreads." Rahman asked, "Where? Fire headquarters?" Chris shook his head. "Downtown's a problem. Too dense. We need space." He looked toward the bay where our ambulance sat. Then he looked at us behind the barrier. "Leah?" he called. "Mike? You still good?" Leah answered immediately. "Yes." I hesitated half a beat because I was listening to my own body like it was a stranger. "Yeah," I said, "still good." Chris nodded, but his eyes held mine. He was counting down without saying the numbers. Around 5 p.m., the station's front door buzzer went off. Everyone froze. We didn't usually get walk-ins. People called dispatch. They didn't show up at a station unless they were desperate or confused. Chris gestured for silence. He moved toward the door with the firefighter captain, both of them masked. They didn't open it. They looked through the narrow window. A woman stood outside holding a small child on her hip. The kid looked limp. Not dead, just drained. The woman's hair was messy, her eyes wide. She pressed the buzzer again. Chris opened the door crack, chain still on. "Ma'am," he said through the gap, "what's going on?" "My son," she said, voice breaking. "He won't wake up right. He's talking, but he's not right. The hospital turned us away." The child lifted his head slightly and looked through the gap. His eyes met Chris's. "Please," the child said. His voice was flat and adult in tone, not the sound you expect from a little kid asking for help. "Let us in." I felt hair rise on the back of my neck. Chris kept the chain on. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "has he hurt anyone?" The woman's eyes darted away. He scratched his dad," she admitted, "but he didn't mean it." The child smiled faintly. "Open," the child said. Chris didn't move. The firefighter captain shifted his weight, hand hovering near his radio. Chris spoke slowly. "I'm sorry. We can't let you in. We can give you supplies. We can call." "There is no one," the woman snapped, sudden anger. Tears streaked her face. "There is no one. They said viral outbreak confirmed and then they stopped answering. The child's face tightened. He started to squirm in her arms. "Mom," he said, and there was something sharp in the word. "Open it." The woman tightened her hold, but the child jerked, stronger than he should have been. He swung his head and bit her shoulder through her shirt. She screamed. Chris slammed the door shut instinctively, chain rattling, then locked it fully. Outside, the woman fell to her knees, trying to pry the child off. The child clung and bit again. Not ripping, not gore, just puncture, pain, and the horror of watching someone you love become a danger. Inside, everyone stood silent, listening to her screams through a metal door. Leah pressed her hands to her mouth behind the barrier. Her eyes filled with tears. Chris's face was gray. He whispered, "Get away from the door." Ramon backed up, the captain backed up. Chris didn't look at us. He didn't have to. We could all feel what that scene meant. The infection was not contained in hospitals. It was in homes, in cars, in children. And the infected could speak. Outside, the screaming turned into sobbing, then into a weird quiet. Then there was a thump against the door. Soft at first, then harder. A voice came through the metal. "Please," the child said. Then, after a pause, the voice changed tone. "You can't hide," the child said. "You can't hide." The banging stopped. Footsteps moved away. Chris exhaled shakily. Nobody spoke for a long time. After that, the station became a bunker. They taped paper over the small windows. They moved vehicles to block the bay doors from the inside, rolling tool cabinets and heavy equipment into place. They killed the exterior lights so we wouldn't be a beacon, and we waited. The next hours were the worst kind of time because nothing happened and everything could happen. Leah and I sat in our partition and tried to keep our minds from chewing themselves apart. We talked about stupid normal things at first, calls we'd run, the best gas station coffee on the route, the time Leah had to chase a runaway dog out of a school parking lot while wearing full turnout gear because the fire crew thought it was funny. Then, inevitably, we circled back to the outbreak. They talked normally, Leah said, voice low, even when they were violent. That's not rabies, that's not drugs, that's something else. I nodded. It's like they're still there until they're not. Like a switch, she repeated. I stared at my wrist. The tiny abrasion looked even smaller now, like it was mocking me. We should clean it again, Leah said. I already did, I replied. Do it again. So I did, soap, water, scrub, until my skin turned red. It didn't change the fact that 6 hours ago in a grocery store, a man with no pulse had grabbed me and tried to bite. At around 7 p.m., Chris came to the barrier for another check. His voice was different now, tighter, more clipped. We're getting reports of looting, he said. Not just opportunistic. People targeting pharmacies, clinics, EMS stations, they're looking for supplies. Leah frowned. Who's they? Chris hesitated. Some are just people. Some are infected who still look normal. That made my stomach twist. Great, I muttered, so we can't even tell. Chris nodded. That's why we don't open the doors. He looked at me. How you feeling? I took a breath. I scanned myself, heart racing. Hands slightly sweaty. But that could be fear, that could be adrenaline, that could be normal. Okay, I said. Chris didn't look convinced. Any irritability? Any urge to act aggressively? I almost laughed at the absurdity. My job involved stepping into chaos and occasionally using controlled force to keep someone from hurting themselves. I'd been irritated 1,000 times on shift, but this question was different. It was asking if my mind was changing shape. No, I said. Just scared. Chris nodded once. Scared is normal. He stepped back. We're at about 8 hours since contact, he said, mostly to himself. 4 more to clear the window, if the window is accurate. When he walked away, Leah leaned toward me. He thinks you're going to turn, she whispered. I didn't answer because I didn't trust my voice. Later, around 8:30, the power flickered. Lights dimmed, then surged back. The radio crackled, then steadied. The hum of the bay fan shifted pitch. Raman shouted from the other side of the partition, "Grid's unstable." Chris's voice followed, "Prep the generator." We could hear them moving. Metal clanged. A door opened. The low rumble of the station generator test started somewhere behind the building. The flicker reminded me how fragile everything was. We built a modern world on invisible systems. Electricity, water pressure, cell towers, and all of it could go wrong in a day. My phone buzzed again. Another alert. This one was longer, more detailed, and it chilled me because it tried to sound calm. Emergency update. Viral outbreak confirmed statewide. Transmission. Close contact with infected individuals, especially saliva exposure. Incubation, up to 12 hours. Early stage, normal speech, mild agitation, confusion. Late stage, sudden hyperaggression. Seek isolation if exposed. Saliva exposure. The words, especially saliva, were like a finger tapping the abrasion on my wrist. Leah read it over my shoulder. Mild agitation, she said. Confusion. She looked at me. Be honest, anything? I swallowed, my mouth felt dry. No, I said. But then, as if my brain wanted to sabotage me, a thought flashed. I want to get out. I want to open the door. I want to move. It wasn't an infected thought. It was a trapped thought. But the fact that I had to analyze my own impulses made me feel less like myself. I stood up abruptly. Leah flinched. Mike? I realized how that looked. Sudden movement, tension, possible agitation. I forced my shoulders down. Sorry, I said. Just need to stretch. Leah didn't relax. She watched me closely, and that hurt more than the scratch. Around 9:30 p.m., a thud hit the bay door. Everyone froze again. We didn't have exterior cameras on the bay door, just the small high windows we'd covered. We could only hear another thud, metal vibrating. Then a voice muffled through the bay door. "Help," it said. "Hello? Is anyone in there?" Chris moved quietly. He motioned for silence. He approached the bay door from the side, not directly in front of it. The firefighter captain stayed close, holding a long tool that looked like a pry bar. Not as a weapon, as a tool, but in that moment, everything was a weapon if it needed to be. The voice outside sounded like a young man. "I'm hurt," it said. "I need help, please." Chris didn't answer. The voice continued, more urgent. "I'm not sick, I'm not, I got attacked. Let me in, I can't stay out here." Chris whispered to the captain. "Could be real. Could be infected. Could be a trap." The captain whispered back. "If we open, we lose everything." Another thud, closer. Like a shoulder hit the metal. Then the voice changed. It didn't become growly, it didn't become monstrous, it became calm. "I know you're in there," the voice said. A pause. Then, almost conversational, "Open the door." My heart hammered. Leah's hand went to her mouth again. Chris backed away from the door slowly, as if the metal itself could reach out and grab him. From behind the door came a scratching sound, fingernails maybe, then a bang. Then another. The sound kept repeating. Not frantic, rhythmic. Like someone was testing structure. Ramon whispered, "They're learning." Chris turned and hissed, "Everyone back, stay quiet." The banging continued for a while, then stopped. Footsteps moved away. We all held our breath until the silence felt like a weight. Finally, Chris spoke softly to everyone. "They can talk," he said. "They can act normal, they can fake it. We do not open, under any circumstances." There was a murmur of agreement, but it sounded hollow. Because we all knew the kind of people we were, we opened doors for strangers as a job. We ran toward screams. We were not built for refusing help, and now refusing help was survival. Hours ticked by. 10 p.m., 10:30, 11. Every time I checked the clock, I felt like I was checking a bomb timer. At about 11:15 p.m., I realized something and it hit me like a punch. 12 hours from 11:15 a.m. was 11:15 p.m. We were at the edge of the window. Leah realized it too. She looked at her phone, then at me. "We're there," she whispered. "If it's accurate, we're there." I swallowed hard. My mouth was still dry. I waited for something to happen, for my thoughts to shift, for the urge to attack to rise like a wave. Nothing happened. Relief came, but it didn't come clean. It came tangled with doubt. Because the alert said up to 12 hours. Up to could mean 10. Could mean 12. Could mean 11:59. Could mean the next minute. I sat very still. Leah whispered, "How do you feel?" I listened to my own brain like it was a radio station with bad reception. "I feel tired," I said. Leah nodded slowly. "Tired is fine." But even tired made me nervous because exhaustion can make you irritable. And irritability was a symptom now. At 11:30, Chris came to the barrier for another check. His face looked older than it had that morning. "It's been 12, he said. He looked at me with the same calculating eyes. "Still okay?" I nodded. "Still me." Chris studied me for a few seconds that felt like minutes. Then he nodded back. "Okay, that's good." He exhaled, and some tension left his shoulders, but not all of it. "Still," he said, "we don't assume we're safe. We assume the alert is incomplete. We keep the barrier overnight. We keep distance. Tomorrow, we reassess. Leah nodded. Agreed. Chris leaned closer, voice low. We got another update from a hospital contact. They're seeing a pattern. What pattern? Leah asked. Chris hesitated. Some people don't turn in 12 hours. Some turn later. Some never show symptoms, but still behave wrong. My stomach dropped again. Chris continued. They're calling it phases, but it's messy. They don't have hard rules yet. Hard rules. That's what we wanted. A checklist, a timer. But outbreaks don't respect checklists. Chris stepped back. Get rest, he said. We'll rotate watch. He left. Leah and I sat in the dim bay light, the ambulance beside us like a loyal animal waiting for a command, and the station around us quiet in a way that felt unnatural. Outside, the city was still there. The suburbs, the freeways, the neighborhoods with block walls and palm trees. But I could feel it shifting in the dark, the way a storm gathers before you see the clouds. Leah finally spoke, voice small. If this keeps going, what do we do? I stared at the partition of shelves and tarps we'd built. It was absurd and brilliant at the same time. EMS improvisation applied to survival. We do what we always do, I said slowly. We triage, we stabilize, we adapt. Leah snorted softly, a humorless sound. We're not equipped for this. I nodded, no. Then I looked at the ambulance. But we have something most people don't. Leah followed my gaze. A vehicle? More than that, I said. We have medical supplies, oxygen, meds, trauma gear, radios. We have a station with water and power, and we have training. Leah's eyes flicked toward the front door, toward the outside world where people were banging and pleading and tricking. And we have a target, she whispered. I didn't disagree. Minutes later, the station radio crackled again. Dispatch, voice strained. All units, if you are able, advise status. We are receiving multiple reports of violence near major intersections. Some responders are down. Repeat, some responders are down. Chris's voice answered, steady. Station 4. 2 is secure. We are unable to respond at this time. A pause. Dispatch replied, and the dispatcher's voice trembled just slightly, like she was trying not to cry. Copy, she said. Stay safe. The radio went quiet again. Leah leaned back against the ambulance box and closed her eyes for a moment. I stared at my hands. I thought about the man in the grocery store. Kevin, he'd said. I thought about how he'd talked normally, how he'd smiled and said, "You're doing great," before he hurt someone. I thought about the child at the front door. I thought about the rhythm of the banging on the bay door, like a test. And I realized the outbreak wasn't just a virus. It was a collapse of trust. If you couldn't tell who was safe by looking, if speech meant nothing, if pleas could be traps, then society, normal society, couldn't function. You couldn't run a hospital like that. You couldn't run an ambulance service. You couldn't even run a neighborhood. You could only run a small group with rules and boundaries. The next morning would matter. We'd need water plans, fuel plans, contact plans. We'd need to decide whether to stay in place or move. We'd need to decide who we could help and who we couldn't. We'd need to decide whether we were still EMTs or something else. But for that night, in the dim bay, with barrier between us and the rest of the station, with the city outside turning into something unfamiliar, the only thing I could do was stay awake and listen for the next sound. Because if the outbreak had taught me anything in one day, it was this. The moment you thought you understood the rules was the moment the rules changed. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.